Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm with Daniel Warnshuis from Utopia Vineyard and Winery. We're in the Willamette Valley in a very special little AVA called Ribbon Ridge. Daniel, welcome, and tell us about Utopia and where we are.
Well, thanks, Allison. It's a pleasure to be here. We are in our little AVA, the tiniest in Oregon, which is called the Ribbon Ridge American Viticultural Area. And we're up at our winery on our new property in our log cabin, enjoying the afternoon.
It is a log cabin.
Yeah.
And so tell me about Utopia. When did you get it started, and what's your property like here?
Oh, so I purchased the land for my vineyard for Utopia in 2000, October of 2000, and I've done 4 plantings there since then. And I now have about 17 acres under vine on 19 acres, and that's where our home is, and also our tasting room. And we have lots of fun and games there. We have a bocce ball and cornhole and lots of picnic areas and fun stuff to do there. I consider it a safe haven for wine lovers, where they can come and enjoy not just the wonderful, beautiful countryside that we have here in Oregon wine country, but also learn about viticulture, learn about winemaking to whatever extent they want, and just be in a very relaxed atmosphere.
And then, you have 17 acres planted, but we're up in a log cabin that's on a separate property. Where are we, and what's happening up here?
Yeah, so we're still in the Ribbon Ridge AVA, and in 2018, we bought this property, which is a separate piece of 37 acres of Ribbon Ridge that is currently undeveloped, where you saw on the way in that we're logging the land right now in effort to clear it to plant our new estate vineyard. And we've got a winery here, and we have our guest cabin here. And in the future, we'll have a second tasting room here.
And so you're producing? Obviously, we're in the Willamette Valley, so Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. What else are you producing?
So my estate wines are Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and I make 4 different Pinot Noirs each year now, and I also make a rosé of Pinot Noir, and I make a Pinot Noir Blanc, or white Pinot Noir to some, and then I make my estate Chardonnay. So those are my estate wines, but I also do look from time to time, mostly among friends' vineyards, for other interesting things in order to broaden the product line and to give us other good stuff to drink, really, is the point. So I've made a number of Rhone varieties in the past from vineyards in Southern Oregon, and then I also make a delicious dessert wine from a Late Harvest Riesling that I make as iced wine, just to give us more breadth in our product line and just more fun stuff.
And what is your total case production?
It's right around 3,000 cases, give or take, depending on the vintage.
And what markets are you in?
So we are direct to consumer, 100% from our tasting room on Ribbon Ridge. And we ship to our wine club to about 35 states currently. And then, of course, we sell in our tasting room, and we had about 7,000 visitors there this last year. So it's surprising the number of people that come up here, but it's become quite a destination spot. And then other than that, I do a little winery direct sales to restaurants, primarily where we want to build the brand. And people come and they like it, and I never say no.
Never say no.
Yeah.
So what is your first memory relevant to wine?
Well, I would have to go back to my teenage years for that one and out myself, okay? So, I mean, Annie Greensprings ring a bell, or Strawberry Hill.
Oh, of course.
Mateus Rosé. That was probably more in my early 20s when I was trying to impress a girl or something with my sensitive nature. So I a lot of, and camping with my family. drinking red Burgundy from Gallo in a jug.
So those were your first memories. But you were telling me a story earlier that maybe you can talk a little bit about how you were sort of introduced to the world of wine.
Yeah, it's a world of good wine. And that was through a boss that I had in my first corporate job after college. And he was an amateur chef and a wine collector. And I was fortunate enough to work for him, and he invited me to dinner at his home. And that was the first time I tasted a first growth Bordeaux. And we actually tasted a couple of them that night.
Not a bad way to get started.
No, I mean, that made a major impression on me, obviously. And I literally decided right there that I wanted to become a wine collector and converted my laundry room to a wine cellar. And it was a much better wine cellar than it ever was laundry room.
And you were how old at this time?
I was in my early 20s. I was 23, 24 years old.
So you started wine collecting at 23 years old. And, over the years, as a collector, you obviously collect a lot of great wines. And if first growth were your first ones, you started on the right foot. You weren't collecting, Strawberry Hill. But I'm curious, aside from that first wine that really set you on a path, is there another memorable wine? I'm sure you've had many of them, but is there another memorable wine that kind of stands out that set you on maybe another path, or was an aha moment to something in the wine world? Or maybe there were two. I don't know.
Well, I mean, there were several probably, but some of the ones that, stand out still to me today were people like Joseph Phelps or Spotswood or Camus, a lot of the big names that people know, Silver Oak, from the Napa Valley at that time, because Napa was really the premier wine region in the U.S., probably still is today in most people's minds. However, I also was very fortunate enough to know some of the small producers whose names you wouldn't recognize who were making some great wines as well. And I was able to work with some of them. I eventually turned my collection into a import-export wine business in Napa, and through marketing efforts met a lot of the up-and-coming winemakers, and those became my circle of friends, and I got to drink a lot of good stuff that way. And so, now I'm drinking my 85s, 86s out of my cellar right now, some of those wines.
Wow. Well, speaking of which, if we were to go into your wine cellar, what would we find in there today?
Well, you would definitely find a preponderance of Oregon Pinot Noir now, because I've been in Oregon for 20 years, and you want to keep up with the neighbors. And I've always been a huge fan of Oregon Pinot Noir, even in the very early days when most Americans didn't even realize that Oregon was making great wine. I was already a big fan, and actually had Oregon Pinot Noirs in my California business in Napa. And then I returned the favor when I came here and brought some California wines, because to me, good is good. Mm-hmm. And there's a variety out there, and part of the spice of life is obviously variety. Absolutely. And discovering a new favorite is one of my favorite things about wine, because it's just endless.
Yeah, absolutely. So what else would we find in your cellar other than a good smattering of Oregon wine?
Well, I wish I could say that you would still find a lot of those first and second growth Bordeaux, but I drank them all, or most of them anyway. But, you would still find a number of old California cabs. I mean, things like Randy Dunn and Rick Foreman and, a lot of the smaller guys that maybe not everyone knows. But I love mountain fruit from Napa, so I kind of stick to Spring Mountain, so Barons and Hitchcock or Pride Mountain are some of the newer labels now. But I like the mountain fruit. I think it has a particular richness to it. And so I tend to gravitate off the valley floor and get up on the hillsides, off the beaten path a little bit. So you'd still find quite a bit of that. And then I went through a number of phases in my wine collecting career. So you can find anything from South African to Australian to Chilean. And, I love it all.
So is there anything in particular you've opened recently that drink really well?
Well, yes, without sounding too pretentious. We enjoyed a 1995 Phelps Insignia Magnum over the holidays with some friends, and also a 2000 Opus 1 that same evening, both Magnums, and it was a pretty fun night.
Some good things in your cellar. Well, it's a good thing you drink them. So, traveling around the world and being a collector, starting with French wines of Bordeaux and Burgundies and such like that, who do you think drinks the best in terms of quality when you look at all the different countries out there?
Yeah, that's a trick question, Allison. I mean, I think you can get great wines from any of those world-class regions. The vintages in Europe vary more than what they vary here, to my palate at least. We have more fruit-forward wines here and more consistency, although Willamette Valley Pinot Noir is a bit of an exception to that for a small producer who's making, unique wines each year. That's one of the really cool things, I think. But, I'm still go back to my roots, to those French wines. To me, that's the center of the wine world still. And so Burgundy, Bordeaux, Rhone, I love all those varieties. And I particularly like the single varieties when they're made as 100% versus the blends sometimes, just because you really get the character of that particular variety, and it's different and it's good. I like different and good.
So, do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
Well, perfect is a pretty tall order. My winery is called Utopia.
So you're aiming for it.
Yeah, so we have the right goal. We're definitely not aiming for the middle. But I think it's a good goal. And I think, people that are in the wine world, you have a lot of really passionate people, and they really are putting a lot of effort. I mean, it's blood, sweat, and tears, literally, into every vintage, especially when you talk about these family-owned small wineries that are producing world-class wines just, based on their passion and their love of it. It doesn't really get any better than that. I don't know if I'd call it perfection, but it's pretty close.
But is there a such thing as a perfect variety?
Well, Pinot Noir, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to lead me there, I'll go.
Well, no, it doesn't have that answer. I just always love when it gets skirted around because nobody really wants to,
Yeah.
It's a tough question.
Well, if you drink long enough, I think that the normal evolution of a wine drinker is going to lead him eventually to Pinot Noir. It's more complex. It has more subtlety. It has more nuance. And it's just something that, it goes so well with so many things. Anything that grows in the ground is great with Pinot Noir, right? Plus, you can have it with all those other things too. So I think it's the most versatile. And so as far as that goes, it's got to be the closest to perfection.
Closest to perfection. I buy that. So when it comes to food and wine pairing, and you were saying that Pinot is such a versatile grape, do you think that there are rules to follow with food and wine pairing, or are there certain guidelines that you use when you're choosing? Do you believe that it's white wine and fish, red wine and meat? Do you think that you're looking for textures or, sort of whatever you're in the mood for? How do you approach it?
Yeah, white with fish and red with meat is the old adage. It was an axiom for a reason because it actually does work. But I think more modern, we think of, like you said, pairing the textures, or also sometimes you want to contrast. You could have like a cold Viognier with Thai food, and you could let the spice and the fruit work together, or you could pick something spicy to go with that and let the spices build on each other. So I think nowadays we have much more options, and good is good, and if you like it, it's great. So I don't want to limit myself or anybody else, and I think you don't need to get locked into just the old adages. You can be a little bit more adventurous nowadays.
Do you find that on a typical evening you pick your wine before you choose what you're going to eat, or you know what you're going to eat and then pick the wine?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it could go either way, but usually I know what I'm going to drink with it. But I like to keep several bottles open in my cellar. So when I'm cooking, I like to drink a white wine. A little bit might go in the pan, a little bit down my throat.
Of course.
It's fun, right? And then maybe my bridge wine at dinner, and maybe something after dinner that's a little more full-bodied. But just kind of exploring what's in the cellar. And you can, nowadays you can have several bottles open, and you can gas them or whatever, and keep them and drink them over a few days, and they're fine.
Right. So getting down to you as a wine drinker, simple question, but maybe it's not so simple. Red, white, or rosé?
Oh, red. I mean, I love Chardonnay and I love Pinot Noir, obviously white and a red. Those are my two favorite varieties. And I love a good example of either one of those. But I mean, if you put me on a desert island and said you only could take one, it's gonna be Pinot Noir.
Okay, still or sparkling?
Well, I mean, I like them both. I drink sparkling fairly often. I mean, I'm kind of the school where it's not just for toasting and for holidays. I like it with seafood a lot. And so if we're having seafood, I think of that often, depending on what it is, but certainly oysters on the half shell or something like that is classic. And so I'm thinking of that when I'm thinking of pairing. I'm not leaving out sparkling wines by any means.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So what's your opinion about wine critics and scores?
Well, I mean, I think the golden age of wine critics has come and gone. I mean, nowadays consumers have a lot of tools that didn't exist in the past. There was the Parkerization of wine, and now we have apps. We have Vivino, we have Delectable, we have Cellar Tracker, we have the internet. We have all this information that's right at the fingertips of consumers. So these tools really democratize wine, I think, and instead of just getting one person's opinion on a wine, you can get a broad spectrum. So not only if the wine is highly rated, but it's had many reviews that are consistent, then it's going to also have broad appeal. And that's not to take anything away from the wine reviewers because they're pros. They do it for a living, and there's obviously a different level between that and consumers, and I think you just have to take them all into consideration. But I think the democratization of wine is a good thing for the consumer.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that scores are useful for a small brand like yourself, or not really in the realm of what you're looking at when you're, marketing your wines?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. I mean, consumers pay attention to that. There's still a lot of power with the big publications, and certainly through their subscriptions they have a lot of people who are very serious consumers, obviously, and they're following a lot of those guidelines. So yeah, I think it's important, and I think it's it's one aspect of your market. It's an important aspect of marketing your wine.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So if space aliens were to land on your property, which of your wines would you want to present to them?
Well, I have my very special wine, which I call Utopia Eden, which is my vision of Power Pinot. And I only make 2 barrels of it each year, and only in certain years. And that would be the one that I would want to share with E.T. if he showed up on my vineyard.
For somebody who hasn't had the pleasure to taste your wines yet, what do you think they're missing out on?
Well, I mean, they're just missing out on an authentic wine that's, we farm our grapes organically, so we think that's the right way to do it. We think it makes a better product. We do everything by hand to perfection every year. And so like any serious winery, we're trying to make the best wine we can every year. But we want to make wines that are characters, that show the true character of that growing season or that vintage. Mm-hmm. So it needs to also be a reflection of that vintage. And those differences make it interesting for me as well. As the winemaker, I really celebrate those differences because every year is different.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of every year being different, we know that, as you're saying, every year is different, vintage variation. Definitely here in the Willamette Valley is something you guys experience. No 2 years are alike. But do you find that there are things that repeat themselves, that there are some more commonalities than differences from vintage to vintage?
Well, if you look recently at 2014 through 2018, we had a succession of 5 back-to-back warmer than average growing seasons, which actually moved us on the Winkler scale to a Region 2 from a Region 1, which we've historically been, which is pretty significant. Those warmer vintages are going to be more fruit forward, so there's going to be a common thread. But with that said, the way that the heat accumulates during the growing season will still make a difference. So if you're paying attention, you'll still taste a difference in those wines, even though they're all from hot vintages, but they're going to be more similar than, say, a cooler vintage like 10 or 11, where we were way below our average amount of cumulative heat.
Yeah. Do you look for any signs or predictors that will help you kind of guess what a vintage is going to be?
Well, I mean, what we make sure that we do is that we thin early and aggressively, and we defoliate early and aggressively, and we don't cut any corners in the vineyard. If we do that every year and if we manage the canopy properly, then there's no reason why we shouldn't get fully ripe.
You're a family-run business. I know that I met your daughter in the tasting room and your wife, and the family is here, and it's a small operation. Have you guys established any good luck rituals that you do at the beginning of harvest that sort of sets the mood for the hard work ahead or during harvest?
Oh, I love that question. Actually, we have a couple. We have a couple of rituals. The first one, which I like, is we bottle and release our rosé right around bud break, and so that's the renewal time, and so when we bottle the rosé and we're drinking that, it reminds us of spring and the renewal that's happening and the vineyard coming back to life after being dormant all winter. And then I do a little thing with my final press load each year, which I make a batch of grappa from the grape skins to celebrate the end of crush. So yeah, and then we drink that in our bocce league in the summer.
And then you drink it all.
Oh yeah, we have many friends, as you can imagine, so we get lots of help with that.
So grappa, any when you drink a little too much, any good tips for hangovers?
Well, I mean, don't light a match on me the day after bocce league. I can tell you that much. Yeah, no, I mean, the hair of the dog is always the best in my book.
So going back to a little more serious note from hangovers, when you're living in your vineyard, you're living on your property, and you've grown intimate with your surroundings, and I'm sure you walk through your vineyards on a daily basis, probably multiple times. What kind of relationship would you say you have with your vines? Is it one that you talk to them? Is it one that they're talking to you? Or and if you do talk to them, what do you say to them?
Well, I let them know that I'm thinking about them, most importantly, right? And yes, I actually do talk to them. Well, I'm by myself, so I have to talk to something, right? So, yeah, I do. And I talk to the wines, in the cellar room. And, really, it's just letting them know I'm thinking about them and making sure that I'm really paying attention to what's going on at every different phase, because all of those phases are important, and the transition from phase to phase are critical times. And so, yeah, it's a labor of love, but it's so important to be tuned in like that.
Mm-hmm. So you encourage them and give them support. You let them know that you love them.
Absolutely. I think of them just as I do my children.
So I'm curious, some people read the tea leaves in the bottom of a cup. If you could read the bottom of a red wine glass, what would you like it to tell you?
That there's more to be had of that wonderful wine, because that's one of the frustrating things about wine is right when it's really good, it runs out, and that's always something that frustrates me. But I always wish for a little bit more of one of the really great wines.
When you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Actually, I wanted to be a teacher. That's what I thought I was going to be.
And that clearly did not work out.
Yeah, some might say that I teach every day now in my tasting room in my vineyard, but it was a different route as life happens.
Yeah. And when you're not working, how do you spend your free time?
Well, my other hobby is free diving.
Really?
So we try to do that a couple of times a year. And then we go on hikes. We take the family and we go out to the gorge and we hike, or we go over to the coast and have some seafood and a beer. But yeah, I love going to the coast. I love going out to the gorge. I mean, Oregon is phenomenal beauty. And, we've been here 20 years, so there's still lots for us to explore.
Yeah, it is a beautiful outdoorsy place to be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When you're planning a romantic evening for you and Kathy, what sort of wines would you be opening up to set the mood?
Whatever she wants. Literally. But no, she lets me pick the wines usually. And, a lot of times we enjoy wine with food. So we really kind of are always pairing our dinners with whatever wines we're going to drink. I do some of the cooking sometimes so that she can relax, and sometimes she does it. And so it's a good give and take.
I like that. So when you look back at, the people who have influenced you in your life over the years and words of advice that have been given, whether it was from family or mentors or teachers or coworkers or friends, is there a piece of advice that has really stuck with you, something that you carry with you to either live your life or do your work on a daily basis?
Well, sure. I mean, I had a lot of, people that have helped me through my life, like most people. My father always said, aim high and hold your aim. And so I've always tried to do my best as a result of that.
I like that. And if you could offer advice to our listeners, what kind of advice would you give to them?
Whatever it is you love, do that, because time ends up being the only commodity in the end. Mm-hmm. And, if I have a regret, it's that I didn't become a full-time winemaker sooner and run and have my own business and do something that fulfills me. Intrinsically as well as monetarily. Wine is not about money if you're a small farmer. Survival and spending your money, it's more about that. Right. But doing what you love, giving back to the community, taking care of the land for future generations, and making your livelihood. Those are all things that really push my buttons.
You bought your property in 2000. And your first release was in 2005, if I'm not mistaken? Correct. And so, but you were telling me you didn't become a full-time winemaker and move here permanently until what year?
2007.
2007. So you've been here a little over 10 years, making this your full-time life. When you look back at your career, from wine and even before, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
Well, I always feel the most proud over the more challenging vintages because I think those are what separate the men from the boys, and those are the years where somebody who is doing it right, your wines are going to stand out more. Mm-hmm. And it's just in general it's more challenging, so to make good wine in a more challenging year is, to me, it's more gratifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were tasting one of your wines that you were expressing. Was it the 2013?
Yes.
That was a little, you didn't take some risk?
One that separated the men from the boys.
Well, it was a very good wine, so good accomplishment, good achievement.
Thank you.
So, complete the sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
It's like a day without light.
If you could imagine a scenario, sitting at a table, enjoying dinner, and you could be joined at that dinner by anyone from any walk of life, of fame, fortune, popularity, personal. Who would you want to be drinking your wine with you, having a bottle of Utopia?
Robert Mondavi.
I like that.
Yeah, I admire him and what he did for the wine industry.
Mm-hmm. So you were saying that if you had to go to a deserted island, you would take Pinot with you if you could just take one wine. But if I let you take 3 wines, what would they be?
Well, there would be a white in there, and it would be a Burgundy.
Okay.
And there would be the Pinot Noir, of course. From Willamette Valley.
Okay.
Of course. And then I'd probably want to take something that was off the beaten path, something that surprised me. Because I just discovered it. So, it could be just some really off the cuff kind of, blend that I never had before. I just love that about wine, where you can find your new favorite after 30 or 40 years in the wine business. It's amazing.
Yeah. So, based on the wines that you were talking about to a desert island, but also through your portfolio, you said that you make 1 Chardonnay, you make 4 Pinot Noirs, you make a Rosé, and you make a white Pinot. We play a little game where we pair wine and music. And it could be a genre of music, it could be a style of music, it could be an artist, a particular song. But looking at some of the wines we've tasted of yours that hopefully other people will taste, I want you to describe what you want to listen to or what it makes you think of. So let's start with your white Pinot. Kind of a unique idea to vinify Pinot Noir white, and also, but it still has body and texture.
So the white Pinot reminds me of summer. And when I think of summer, I think of the beach. And so I might think of some type of calypso kind of marimba band or something like that would be awesome to pair with the white Pinot.
And your estate Pinot Noir?
My estate Pinot Noir, that's, like the Eagles, Take It Easy or something like that. Something on the softer side of classic rock would be perfect for that. So
then you make 3 individual vineyard selections. You have your 777 clone Pinot Noir, you have your Eden, and you have your Paradise. Yes. How would you describe those wines through song?
Well, I mean, the Paradise, that is like classical music to me. That's like Mozart, right? Because you're bringing the orchestra together with the 3, the 3 core, the quality of the vineyard, the 3 clones from my oldest vines. And to me, it's like a symphony. So I like that about it. The Eden, that is, it's a powerful wine. So, you could go with 90s grunge, a little Nirvana or something while you're enjoying that. And then the 777 is very savory, right? So when I think of that, I think of something from the South, like some good New Orleans jazz.
Very well done. You described your wines in a musical sense, and now I'm thirsty.
Me too.
So when we look out at, we're here in the Willamette Valley in the winter, and it's rainy and foggy, very typical weather for here. But climate is changing constantly. Do you think we'll still be drinking wine in 500 years' time?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, wine has been around since the dawn of civilization. It's always been here. It wasn't as good as it is now. but yeah, I fully expect that as long as there's humans, there will definitely be wine consumed.
So we're coming towards the end, and I have one final question for you. Where in the world do you want to visit? What's the top of your bucket list of wine regions?
Well, I would love to go to Portugal and Spain. It's on my list right now. I haven't been there, and I'm a fan of port, and I'm also a fan of Spanish wines, and I drank a lot of them, but I haven't been there. So I would love to go there and actually visit the vineyards and talk to the winemakers and spend a good amount of time there to get more, like really deep into how they're doing it and maybe even make a little wine.
Well, as you're planning your trip, if somebody wanted to plan their trip to come visit you, what kind of options do they have in visiting Utopia?
Well, we try to make it very easy. We're open daily, year-round. We only sell our wine in our tasting room. We're open a little bit later than most of the tasting rooms, till 6 p.m. On most days. In the summer, we have our bocce league, so we're open a little bit later on certain weekends, especially Saturday night. But you come if you're coming, let us know. It's not required, but it's always nice to know. And if you have any special requests, we'll try to accommodate them. And when you come, just think of it as a safe haven, someplace where you can drink good wine, learn about wine and viticulture, but not feel intimidated at all.
And we can find you online at?
utopiawine.com.
Well, Daniel, thank you for joining us on Wine Soundtrack today, and I hope that people will make an effort to come here, not just to the Willamette Valley, but to Ribbon Ridge, because it's a really special place.
Thank you so much, Allison.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.